Thoughts on the readings for February 20th, Exodus 31, 32, Psalm 89, 1 Corinthians 1, 2. Exodus 31 tells of the two skilled craftsmen divinely equipped for the construction of the tabernacle. Bezaleel, his name means, "in the shadow of the Almighty," and Aholiab, his name means, "my father's tent." Bezaleel was skilled in metalworking. He made the furniture for the tabernacle. Bezaleel is a type of the Messiah, as Moses tells us in the entirety of the 91st Psalm. Aholiab had responsibility for the coverings of the tabernacle and its embroidery, also for the veil between the holy place and the most holy place, and the clothes of the priests, as well as the cutting, polishing and engraving of the stones in the high priest's breastplate. See Hebrews 8 verses 1-5 and 9 verses 1-5. 24-28, 10 verses 19-25. Verses 12-18 link the provision of the Lord's faithful servants, Bezaleel and Aholiab, with the providing of the Sabbath for his people, Mark 2 verses 23-27. The Sabbath existed from the time of creation, but it was made into an observable feast at Sinai. It was Yahweh's sign between himself and his covenant people for all time. Any of God's people who failed to observe the Sabbath were to be put to death. We are told that the lesson for us to cease from sinning and to serve our sovereign on a daily basis. We must rest from our own interests and to choose those thoughts and ways that please our God. Isaiah 56 verses 1-8 and Hebrews 4 verses 7-12. Moses tells Israel of the sanctity and seriousness of his Sabbath covenant with Israel. This covenant, says verse 18, was written by the finger of God. Chapter 32 speaks of yet another ascent into Mount Sinai to actually receive those two tables of stone upon which had been engraved the 10 Commandments. Whilst Moses was with the angel of the covenant in the mountain, the Israelites committed gross immorality and breached the covenant. They goaded Aaron into aiding them in the making of a golden, graven calf. No doubt the people had remembered the calf worship of the god Apis when they were slaves in Egypt. Aaron was weak and thought that he might be able to channel the people's intentions in a different direction. He sought to make the occasion a feast to Yahweh. See also the comments in Psalm 106 verses 19-23, which tell of the incident of the golden calf. Whilst in the mount, both Joshua and Moses heard the noise from the camp. Joshua, who had gone only part of the way with Moses, mistook the noise for war. Moses suspected otherwise, and the angel urged Moses to return to the camp and to deal with the corruption. Moses had not fully completed his descent from the mountain when he saw the nakedness of the people of God. In exasperation, Moses cast down the 2 engraved stone tables. These tables shattered into pieces. In anger, Moses ground the golden calf to powder and sprinkled the golden dust on the water, forcing the people to drink this polluted water. Retribution was now to be taken on the immoral idolaters. Moses asked, "Who is on Yahweh's side?" The Levites responded, and without favor for any, including family, they slaughtered 3,000 of the brethren. For their faithfulness they were given priestly roles, replacing the family firstborn sons, who had until this time exercised that responsibility. The Israelites were severely rebuked for their breach of faith with their God. Moses also said that he would go back to the mountain and seek to atone for their sin. After this, the Lord sent a plague as further punishment for his people. While in the mountain, Moses requested that God put him to death as a substitute for the people's sin. God does not accept substitution for atonement. Psalm 89 concludes Book 3 and the Sanctuary Psalms. It was written by Ethan the Ezrahite. The song celebrates the steadfast love of the Lord. The psalm focuses on God's evident covenant love that was experienced by David. Verses 6-14 speak of Israel's God and his incomparable deeds done for his people. Verse 15 alludes to the tinkling of the bells on the high priest's robe. The sound spoke of the joy of receiving the gospel message, Romans 10. Verses 16-18 describe the exultation of those, Yahweh's people. Verse 27 spoke of the Almighty's choice of David, the youngest of 8 sons, and his elevation to the highest rank of the Lord's firstborn to rule over a mighty kingdom. This was of course a type of Yahweh's Son, promoted above all of Adam's descendants to ultimately come to be the king of the entire earth. Verses 19-28 outline the Lord's defense of his anointed, and that his covenant with David would endure. Verse 29 to 37 recall his sovereign's enduring and sure covenant to David. See 2 Samuel 7 verses 12-17, 19 to 25, and 2 Samuel 23 verses 1 to 8. Verses 32 to 38 tell of Israel's chastening for having departed from the laws of their God. Verses 39 tell of God's suffering nation and the afflictions which come upon all of Adam's children. The psalm concludes with a plea for our Creator's steadfast love to abide upon His people. The letters to the Corinthians begin in the same way as every epistle of Paul prior to his first imprisonment in Rome. Grace, charis the Greek greeting, and peace, shalom the Hebrew welcome. What more could be offered any believer than the grace and peace of the Father? The letters written between the two imprisonments contain the added dimension of mercy, something we become more conscious of needing the older we get. The only exception to this pattern is in Paul's personal letter to Philemon. What wonderful words were told to the Corinthian readers, that by the Father's calling they were saints, or sanctified believers, incorporated into the fellowship of God and His beloved Son. The Apostle informs his readers about the tragedy of forming factions. Christ's ecclesia, His body, cannot be divided into segments which follow human leaders. For that reason, despite the essential nature of baptism, Paul was thankful to have baptized only a few. The Apostle's prime focus was on forwarding the message of the gospel. The essence of that message lay in the power of the preaching of Christ's crucifixion. Read aloud and ponder verses 18 to 31. The last of those verses cites Jeremiah 9 verses 23 to 24. Chapter 2 outlines Paul's determination when he came to Corinth to teach among them nothing except the Christ as the crucified one. That was an unbelievable and inconceivable message, as his quote from Isaiah 64 verses 4 to 5 proves. But our sovereign God has His love and wisdom shared with His children, known partly now with the added promise that the joys and blessings of the kingdom age cannot be understood simply through words which would fail to describe that experience of being the Father's immortalized children. Penned by Warwick Rosser and his team, produced by ChristaDelphinVideo.org.